Hello and welcome to the Child Psych Podcast. I'm Tanya Johnson.
And I'm Tammy Schmoon.
We're registered psychologists, registered play therapists, co-founders of the Institute of Child Psychology, and probably most importantly, mums to 5 beautiful kiddos.
Yeah, and today we're going to be talking about almost tweens, even younger than that, our 8 to 9 year olds and up, a little bit about the starts of puberty and what to expect, and how to have those really uncomfortable conversations with your sons and daughters about the changes that are happening with their body that frankly are pretty embarrassing for them. And I'm in the midst of having these conversations with an 8 almost 9-year-old and an 11-year-old right now. So I think that's where we're gonna dive in. And Tans are a little younger, so
Yeah, it's interesting. You're at a different phase now. I find with my girls right now, we actually just went to the library literally on Saturday and came home with six books talking about bodies and changes in bodies and sex and all of those things. And at first, my oldest daughter was pretty excited, but as we got more and more into the book, now she's like, "Do we have to read this?" And I'm like, I'm trying to make it as relaxed and positive. And she was the one who asked for the book. We've done it before, but it changes as they hit different developmental stages. But I'm definitely way more enthusiastic than she is at this point about reading the books.
that is fair. It's same with the sex conversations I've had with my 17-year-old. You just see the look on her face, and I'm like, sit down, we got to have it. We got to talk about it. I know it's uncomfortable for me too. This is awkward, but it has to be had. Just like, I don't want you to talk about this. I'm like, yeah, well, I don't want to be a grandma. So we're going to talk about this.
And I think it's changed so much, Tammy, because I'm not sure for you when you were growing up, but for me, kind of changes in the body and all of those sort of bigger discussions, they happened, but it wasn't an ongoing conversation. And now we know with the research that these conversations have to be ongoing because obviously kids understand it differently at different times in their life.
That, and they also are subjected to a lot of stuff online now, and you don't really want to rely on something they saw on YouTube or TikTok. So for me, I want that information to come from my mouth, from my husband's mouth, not from something they heard from a friend or they saw on YouTube. Like it's not how I want to parent. Mm-hmm. So I just want any discussions about drugs, alcohol, sex, anything like that to come from our home where it's open, and then they feel like they can talk to us about it. And I know many parents are like, well, the schools do this. I'm like, some schools do it and some don't. That's a problem. It depends where you live in the world, what state, what province, what country you're in. And still, we're not in there to listen to conversations happening. We don't know what exactly is being said. So
absolutely. And I also think I think about my girls, particularly the one who's highly sensitive. I know that in an environment where there's lots of other kids and they're talking about more vulnerable topics, she's going to be so aware of her feelings inside her body as she's listening to everybody else's feelings, that I actually question how much she would actually take in. So even though they might have those, I actually don't trust that she's taking in much. It has to come from me. It has to be in a safe environment, or her dad, but it has to be in a safe environment where she's settled enough to actually be learning.
Yeah, absolutely. I've got one of those too, where I think she would just be mortified talking about this at school. So if she learned, I don't know if she learned anything when she was younger in the classroom. My son, on the other hand, is very enthusiastic to talk about anything like this. He finds it fascinating. So I don't know if you're okay. We'll start with him because he's the youngest and we'll work our way up.
Sounds great.
So if you have a son, this is something that you're going to start talking to them about as young as 7 or 8. I think on our social media, we said 8 to 9, but I was really thinking about it and I wish I would have done it at 7 because with our boys, what's going to start happening is they're going to get spontaneous erections. And to be fair, little boys have this, but at 7, they're aware of it. And the siblings are aware of it. And that was the thing that was, harder for my girls. They're like, what the heck is he doing? And he's trying to cover something up and he's running around with a blanket on his lap. And so there's all of a sudden, there's just kind of awareness around this is happening and he doesn't understand it. And so when he's 3 or 4 and it happens, like he's not aware of that. They don't have that level of self-awareness, self-consciousness of what's happening. And I think the first place it was easy to talk to him about it because we had already used a lot of the correct terms. Like penis, testicles, with our girls, it would be vagina. Like we use those words. So, I mean, that's the first step is when your kids are little, we start introducing the word breasts and penis, and we don't use slang for that. We just make it this normal thing when we're addressing body parts, very conversational. So to have a conversation about my son's penis was no big deal because he's like, we use that word all the time.
Relaxed.
Yeah, we're relaxed about it. So I think we normalize that anatomy first and foremost. And then with my son, the conversation kind of went like this. As you grow, your body's going to start changing. And one of the changes that happens is your penis will stand up and it gets hard. And that's really, really normal because there's tissue in there and blood flows to it. And we say that's called an erection. By the way, then you have this conversation I've had to have this conversation with his sisters. So this isn't a conversation we just have with sons. If there are other kids, especially females in the home, we also want them to be aware of this because they're going to see little boys in classroom who are going to have this. Their brother walks around, especially in the morning like this, and he's covering it up and they're like, what is he doing? And so we want to normalize that this is just what happens when boys hit a certain age. And it's hard, it's embarrassing for him. So we talk about the body changing and then it stands up, it gets hard because there's tissue, blood, and he might ask, well, why does it? And I'm trying to think, I think he said like, why? And we're going to say like, well, it's, as you're growing up, eventually you're going to help a girl make a baby. And that's what it's for, is so you can do that. Not yet, but it's just getting ready for that for when you're an adult. It's just practicing, just like other changes are going to happen, which we'll talk about, like voice changing, but this comes later with our boys, right? Quite a bit later. But for now, it's just saying like, this is something it's practicing for when you're an adult. Beautiful. And if you want the cliche of like when you get married, whatever kind of values you have in your family is fine, or maybe you don't. But that's really what it is. So let's just call it as it is. Call a spade a spade. It's practicing for your son to reproduce. But we're going to say practice for when you're an adult having a baby. That's what it is.
What was his response to that, Tammy?
Well, then he just said, is that what you mean about sex? Because we've already had to talk about that. So then it was like this bridge to a conversation we had previously about what sex was, which he has asked about several times. So then we had to say yes. And that's when the penis goes into the vagina and there's sperm and an egg and we live on a farm too. So they see this a lot with our animals. So I guess it was just like, it came full circle for him. He's like, oh, like that's what that's for. And I was like, beautiful. Yes, like that's how that works. But most people don't have farm animals to compare this to say, oh, it's just like when the goats or the sheep or this, like, versus my kids see that on our farm. But I do want to preface that we let him know, because I've seen it, he's embarrassed. And I would let him know, you don't have to be embarrassed about this, kiddo. Like, it happens to every single man. And that's where I pull my husband. I'm like, right? It happens to, he's like, absolutely. Since I was a little boy, it happens. And so you can tell him, this is something that's private though. So you can go to the bathroom till it goes away or go in your room, or like what you've been doing. If you want to put something over your lap, that's fine. Thinking boring thoughts sometimes can help. Wearing briefs instead of boxer shorts can kind of help with that. So something a little tighter, and sitting down till it goes away can be helpful. And then of course you have that conversation about, private parts are private. We don't show other kids our erections. Just for good measure. Although my kids all know that we don't do that, but just in case you haven't had that discussion. Is like, we don't show that to anyone, including other boys. Like we don't show it unless it's, a doctor or your parents. That would be something that it's uncomfortable. But once you get going, it's really not that bad. And if you've been having the discussion about birds and bees anyway, like we had to explain sex to my kids when they were like 6, just because they asked, because they saw something somewhere, how are babies made? If you've already done this, it's really not that far of a stretch to talk about this. I think it's just the initial first couple sentences that are like, oh, I don't want to even say the word erection. It just feels weird talking to a child about this, but it's happening and they feel like something's wrong with them. So we really want to have that discussion. And then of course, also creating empathy when we talk to our girls about this. It's the same idea. We have the same conversation that other boys, this is going to happen to boys in your class. Even if you don't have a son, it's being able to tell your daughters, this happens to boys. And sometimes you might see that in the class where he's covering up his lap, or, like you see something and that's what it is. So the girls have compassion, but they're also not confused about what's happening.
And I love it, Tammy. I think the main message that I'm hearing is, particularly in the world that we live on right now, our kids are going to be exposed. So choose who gives them the message and what message you're going to give them. So if it comes from the parent first, even if you're embarrassed and you're like, I have no idea how to do this. When I think about my own girls, I want those messages and I want the education to come from me and not from peers or not from online. And the only way to do that is to really start speaking to them and putting those puzzle pieces together. for them.
Absolutely. And of course, like then I would tack on too, and you're gonna have to revisit this again. So it's not like you're gonna start at 8 or 9. You're gonna then, as they get closer to actually hitting puberty, and my son's not hitting puberty at 9, right? He's almost 9. It's gonna happen quite a bit later. But still, I did mention to him, like, your voice is gonna change. And I like even did a demonstration of how it's gonna crack and it's gonna go up and down and it's gonna sound really funny, and then it's gonna go really deep. So you're going to sound like a man. You're going to sound just like your dad. You're going to kind of get stinky, just like your feet get stinky. And we talk about that, like, except it's going to come from under your arms, and you're going to have to wear deodorant just like your older sisters wear deodorant, and I wear deodorant, and Alan wears deodorant. Sometimes you're going to get little pimples, and which my oldest, my 17-year-old, already does stuff for her face. So my son was like, oh, that's when Dixie puts those masks on and she uses that lotion. I was like, yes, exactly like that. Just some of those things. And I think eventually we're going to have to talk about wet dreams and like the the ejaculation that can happen at night. We haven't had that one yet, but that's on the menu in the next couple, probably the next year. But then at the same token, we're having now a discussion with my 11-year-old, which we had a year ago, because we heard some of her friends, kids are developing younger. So we're talking about then periods. So then it's shifting to that girls' bodies are designed to grow babies one day, and they have something called a period where blood comes out of their vagina once a month. And you can use, again, we're using words like menstruation. It's called menstruation. We're going to use the word uterus because the blood is being shedded from the uterus. That's where the baby is. It's like a soft sac that the baby lives in when after sex and a baby is made. So we're having that discussion about the uterus and menstruation and blood. And we talk that, sometimes what happens when right before the blood happens, sometimes our emotions get really, really big. When it happens, we can get cramps. So it's kind of like a headache, but it's like just below your stomach. So we kind of show them where that is, and we can take some Advil or Tylenol for that to help with that. You just have to let us know. Yeah. I mean, the girls one, they really kind of hit that home at school too, though. But I found the erections one, they don't.
No,
So
I
the
agree with
girls
you.
have heard that at school. So you're kind of reinforcing it. They'd already heard it before we had the conversation. It wasn't new for them. But the erections one was, and I wasn't even on my radar as a parent actually to talk about that until I was following a social media account called Nurtured First. And I was like, oh my gosh, you're right. Like, I'm noticing this. I need to talk to him about it. So it was actually someone else, another account that really barred that. And I realized how valuable it was.
Yeah, it's a big one. And I found too, in talking to my girls about periods, that even though I said that the books were a little bit mortifying, having pictures to show them, because this whole concept actually seems really, really, really abstract to them to try and understand how all of this works. So while the words in the book are great, it was actually the pictures that I could show them. This is what happens, and each month this is what happens with the blood. This is what it looks like. I found that the pictures were probably the best, where they went, oh, I get it. So finding a really, really great book where they can actually see it is really helpful, particularly when they're younger and they just don't have that ability yet to understand what actually is happening inside my body if I cannot see it.
Absolutely. Yeah. And that's a good point too. I didn't show them a book. We talked about it, but maybe I should, because that would probably make things a little bit easier. I mean, an erection you can see. So that's pretty obvious, versus a female's anatomy is inside, right? So that's a little bit different and may feel a lot more abstract to them. The other thing, so I think we almost need another episode to talk about how to talk to kids about sex. So I think maybe we can save that for the next episode we do together. But one of the things it's worth mentioning, because I have an 11-year-old, so she's a tween, and she's she'll get her period, and one day she'll be mortified that I talked about this on the podcast, but she doesn't listen to the podcast. So I know it's coming like any time now, just there's been changes going on with her. And I'm noticing some changes with her brain, and I can see she's sleeping later now. Mood changes are starting to happen, being more sensitive to rewards. And this is the time where we start talking to teens when they hit that tween and we think they're at the cusp of puberty, is that their brain is undergoing a lot of shifts. And that means there are shifts in feelings, shifts in peer kind of orientation and like peer approval. It means they're more tired. It means a lot of things. So it's a discussion I want to tag on to this, because I think it's important to have before you're even going on to other topics. And it just normalizes these shifts in their mood and almost personality, and which I know a lot of parents struggle with in the tween years, is the shifts that seem to happen. And so we can talk to our kiddos about the brain is undergoing construction, and it's kind of like upgrading a phone. if that makes
Mhm.
sense. So your brain is clearing out unused apps and speeding up the important ones.
I
And
love
what's
that.
happening? Yeah. So during the teen years, your brain is like trimming these connections that they don't need as much and strengthening the ones that they do. So I told my, she was 14 at the time. We were having this conversation. I said, this is why it's really important to prioritize what's important to you. Like really prioritize, because whatever you're doing in your teen years, that's what your brain is specializing for. So where are we spending our time? Where are we putting our energy? So this like synaptic pruning is just like trimming the hedges, so to speak, and it allows your teen's brain to like run a lot faster. But as a result, it takes a lot of glucose metabolism. So they, of course, have to sleep more than they normally did. And they sleep more and they sleep in later and stay up later because there is a delay in melatonin release in teenagers. So that's why they want to stay up so late, and they're not tired. It's 10 o'clock and you're like telling them to go to bed and they're just like wired. And so early morning classes are really tricky for teenagers and tweens, depending where they're at in terms of puberty and all those hormones being released. So I just let them know, yeah, you're more you need a lot more sleep. You might feel that and you're going to want to stay up later, but getting the amount of sleep is still important. It's really hard to go to sleep. I get that, but you still need 8 to 10 hours of sleep every night. Even though you don't feel tired, you need to go to bed, which means we have to find ways to help the melatonin being released. That helps you go into sleep a lot earlier. So we have to turn off TV. We have to turn off screens. We need that dim light onset for that melatonin to be released. So teaching our teens that they need to get to bed, and we need to find a way to hurry up the melatonin so they can get to sleep and get.
Beautiful.
On the weekends, it's fine. But during the week, we have to be pretty regimented about that. And the amygdala is kind of working overtime because the lower parts of the brain, that's your amygdala, is in charge of your emotions. And with all the hormones going on, that amygdala is a little bit more sensitive. So kids are more sensitive to rejection. They're more sensitive to peer approval because they're also doing something called individuating, where they're leaving the home eventually. So their brain is very attuned to what is going on socially with other kiddos, and that amygdala is firing, and it hasn't caught up to their thinking brain, which is under construction, that prefrontal cortex, yet. And there's heightened activity in something called the nucleus accumbens. That's the brain's reward center. So they're really, really sensitive and driven by pleasure, novelty, peer approval, devices, like anything that sugar, fats, like anything like that is in hyperdrive. So just being aware of that, like they're going to be more interested in it than your younger kids are, actually.
It's so interesting. So interesting.
Yeah, and they're not crazy, they're emotional, their hormones are going up, letting them know that it's just going to happen, and at certain times of the month those hormones are going to, even with boys, the testosterone's higher at certain times of the month than others. So they're going to be more combative, they're going to be more irritable. They have a cycle similar to women, actually, in terms of testosterone. So I think just talking about the brain, talking about what's changing in their body, just normalize that. And maybe parents didn't realize that happens with the teen brain, but it does account for these big emotions that they're having, and the irritability, and this all of a sudden this obsession with what we call the invisible audience, which is like everybody's watching me and everyone's judging me, and even though like probably no one is, right? Everyone's so into themselves as teenagers, right? They're so egocentric. But I talked to my teen about that, the invisible audience, letting her know that it feels that way, but every teen is just so worried about themselves, they don't really notice as other kids as much.
And I think this is that whole thing of when you can name it, it tames it, right? So it's like, if you're feeling this is a normal thing. This is not just you. And then it takes away any kind of shame around it, or like, what's going on here? It's like, no, let's just actually talk about all of these things so that they don't feel shameful, so that it doesn't feel like we're holding something, we're not quite sure what to do with it because mom and dad have never brought it up. But if we open up these conversations, it takes away any of that shame, any of that secrecy, and it just allows more openness around these topics that are so, so, so important to be having with our kids.
Yeah, things are changing, and it's a new season for parents to go through. Just when we thought we had one season under wraps, and another one comes and full of surprises and things we didn't think of. But again, it's a really tumultuous time for our kids when they go through this, just like when they go through the toddler years. It's almost like, I always say the teen years are just like the toddlers with bigger words. So It's very similar. Big feelings. They want to pull away from you, do their own thing, hide in their room. It's just like, I do it, but that's what your 2-year-old says. But your teen's like, no, like, I'm my own person. I'm unique. I'm not like you. I want to do things my way. Very similar to the toddler years, just like bigger words to tell you off with. Like,
it doesn't get easier. It just changes.
It just changes. It's just a season and they're fun, but yeah, that part's a little bit challenging. I think we all just have to remember what that was like, if we can. The best we can is what was that like to be a teen.
Yeah. And I think, kind of to wrap up there, we know that the way to keep our child safest is to have a close, connected relationship with them, to keep having those conversations. All of the research shows that the number one protective factor for kiddos growing up, for our teens, is a close, connected relationship with an adult.
Oh, awesome. Okay.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Okay, we'll talk to you next week.